The reason I'm sitting here is that Alexa Forbes is unwell today and unable to be with us. So we need to start with a motion. So Michael Laws.
Yes, mate.
Yeah. So because you're on Zoom and because Alexa's unwell, so both co-chairs are.
I'll move the motion.
Move that I chair the meeting.
Yeah. So moved.
Thank you. Second by Kate. Any discussion? If not, the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Carried. So we've got an apology from Alexa. We've got Carmen, Michael Laws, Michael Decker, and I think that's all on Zoom. Otherwise, everyone else is in the chamber. So welcome councillors, welcome staff. So we will proceed to the agenda. We have no public forum, so there's no one to address the committee. Moving on to the confirmation of the agenda. As far as I know, there is no changes in terms of urgency. So moving on to, I'll move that we confirm the agenda as circulated. Second by Kevin. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Conflict of interest. It's the standard reminder to stand aside from decision making when a conflict arises. No one wants to raise anything at this point. Okay, moving on to item 5, confirmation of minutes. These are the minutes from the 30th of June 2022. Someone like to move that true and correct. Moved by Hilary, second by Kate. Is there any discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Sorry, I'm just opening up. So moving on to open actions. We've got something to report. Yeah. So there is 3 or 4 actions there. So the first one, coastal monitoring program, is in progress. Nothing to report there, Anita.
No, so the coastal monitoring program is in place and operational, and we'll bring you a report at the end of the financial year, just on what we've been doing.
Thank you. The second one is Lake Snow report. I have been in touch with ECAN Chair Jenny. She shared with me that ECAN had undertaken a lake survey, and they had some support from the Commission of Crown Lands during that process, but she's going to send me the detail of that. I've yet to speak to Chair Nicol from Environment Southland to seek any advice from him on Lagersiphon, etc. And I do plan to talk to Mark Schellenberg too, just to see if there's anything that he can share with us.
Can I just add, we've just commissioned some more work with Mark's group on Lake Snow. So that plan's just gone out in the last couple of days, last week.
Okay.
We've got some more research underway as well.
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
Can I
Hilary.
ask whether that people think that resolution has been adequately dealt with, or does it keep coming back till something else happens? Or
This is the Lake Snow one.
yes,
Yeah.
got one on the 28th.
I mean, ultimately, what needs to be a letter sent to the Minister of Biosecurity, which is Minister O'Connor. I believe to probably take it to that level, because as the discussion was around, this is a national issue. It's obviously far bigger than Otago, and for the council to, I suppose, elevate it to that level from our perspective was I thought the sort of the outcome of the discussion.
Could this be carried forward to somewhere? Because I don't think it's done. The resolution isn't.
It says due on the 28th of September. Does that mean we're getting a council paper or something?
Pass.
That's why I'm saying it's sort of, looks like it's disappeared into the lake, sort of in the sense of there's things happening.
There was no action for staff. Oh, I'm sorry. it
Yes,
was going to be
yes,
you
I
and-
see that.
and Kevin and,
Yeah.
and we're going to have a conversation. We're happy to
So-
draft a letter for you to send to the relevant ministers if that's useful.
That would be useful. Yes, that'd be brilliant. Thanks.
To suggest to other councils to join us, or is that
Yeah,
the,
so Jenny certainly was open to the idea of a joint approach, absolutely. So perhaps once that's drafted, I'll go back to Jenny, and by then I would have touched base with Nicole from Environment Southland, and it may well be a joint letter.
And it could go to the RCEO's group on their agenda. I don't know when their next meeting is, but it's obviously part of that, so it could be a forum for it.
Very good.
so how does it get reported back to a council meeting?
Well, I'd imagine we will hopefully get a reply from the letter from the minister, and then that will come back through my report to, well, I won't say the 28th, but whoever's chair in the next term, it will come back.
Well, could it come back on a council agenda for the 28th to say that it's gone,
Oh,
or
there's an
that
action. Yeah, okay. Okay.
that
Yeah, so
what's
the letters-
happened there, so something's happened,
I'll cover it off in my
Yeah.
report on the 28th.
so that closes off that resolution,
Okay.
and then what comes out of it is,
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah, and the action from it carries on.
yes,
Yeah, that's good.
thank you.
No worries. Thanks for that. Any other discussion on that item? If not, the last item. Gavin, is there any update on the or the patronage report we're getting today? Is there anything else you wanted to cover off there, Gavin?
No, Mr. Chairman, I'm advised the briefing has not yet been arranged.
Oh, okay, this was the ODT, the PR exercise, right? Yep. So that will flow on probably from the report today, maybe?
Well, that will, yes, today's report will supersede that report, so this will be the latest information that you get today.
So again, that's dated the 30th of the 6th.
Due date today.
Is it,
14th.
is it done?
The bottom one.
Yeah. Yeah, so do we think it's therefore done, or how do we close that one off to?
So the question for Gavin then is that does the report that we received today during this meeting provide the framework for some sort of media release? Or, I mean, obviously it's a public document, it's already out there, but I don't know if there's anything being reported by the ODT up until this point, but what is the plan, I suppose, to highlight that the patronage report? Is there a media plan, for example?
The resolution of the committee was to conduct a briefing of the ODT and other outlets. Most briefings have not yet been held nor arranged, so it's an outstanding action, it's not closed now.
Okay.
I don't have a time frame. Staff will be here later, that might be a question for you.
Thank you.
We can do it in the paper.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Moving on to the first item, which is the PM 2.5 investigation in Otago. Welcome to Tom, Anita,
Sarah.
and Sarah.
Sarah's the brains behind this one.
Great report, yeah. Let's have her up front then.
Right in the middle.
Welcome all. Welcome, Sarah. This seems to be obviously doubled the number of monitoring sites across Otago. They're all for the gazetted airsheds sites. So it seems to give us a much better baseline right across Otago as we move towards the new national environmental standards for air quality. And obviously we will be moving, once they are in play, we'll be moving into a new monitoring regime going forward. So it's going to help us plan for that. Is that a fair comment? Maybe not. I'll let you introduce the report.
Thank you. Firstly, I just have one correction on page 13 to the reference in the text for Boudica 2021. It needs to be changed to Boudica Scientific 2021.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so this was a screening study for PM 2.5 to collect as much data as we could in one winter as a baseline. We monitored in places in Otago that either hadn't been monitored before or not for a very long time. So anything outside of our current SOE network. We used 47 instruments in the 15 different airsheds, and the results show that we have elevated PM 2.5 in almost all of these places. And every site except for one had a home heating signature, which is where you have a high evening peak and a smaller morning peak. And that lines up when people are putting their fires on, and it's a pattern that we see all across the rest of our SOE sites as well. And the study helped identify which airsheds have the highest and lowest concentrations, and which will help with our air plan review and for prioritising any future monitoring. I don't know about future monitoring plans yet. That hasn't really been discussed. And yeah, thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Awesome, thank you, Sarah. Kate.
Thank you. Fantastic report, and really exciting that the technology is in place to do some of the stuff at a level, to corroborate stuff, and much more cheaply than the past. As Carmen will confirm, I was in Milton recently and talking to a wonderful lady who dyes wool naturally. What has this got to do with air quality? Lichen is a really good indicator of air quality, I understand. And she's frustrated because while the air quality has improved in Milton at the site that's given, she's really concerned because that's not on the main highway, that if we're not getting the worst measure, which would potentially be where trucks and things are. And she was wondering about getting more sites in that area, especially near the state highway, to corroborate that. And it was just an interesting discussion to be had. So as we go to doing the air plan, which we're starting this year, are we starting? Yeah. How will this data, which does some areas really well, but Milton wasn't included in it, how do we get more data for doing that so we have a better idea?
Yeah, so our current SOE network is based around home heating emissions. So in that sense, our site is in possibly the best place for that. For collecting more data for our existing SOE network, I'm not too sure if we will be doing that. We do, over the years, we've done a lot of spatial studies to find out sort of the best place to monitor. However, there's a few things that are like indicating that we are going to look towards monitoring for traffic. So for instance, the latest Health and Air Pollution New Zealand report indicated that NO2 is more of a health risk than we previously realised. So yeah, there is that. But yeah, in terms of this study, this really gave us an indication of where our areas sit all together and compared to each other.
I may be taking it further than I'm not criticising this report, but it's an opportunity to ask the question, which I think is a really interesting question, using an indicator which we don't have at the moment. But the idea that we're probably at peak traffic for petrol or diesel right now, and it'll be really interesting to get a baseline on that near the roading network to see how and if the air improves on towns that do have state highways through them. It's just, and if we're not measuring it, then we don't really know.
Yeah, that's right. So this year we're actually monitoring NO2 in Dunedin, and that started in July and that's going to go until November. So that's going to be our first baseline for the current times. It had been monitored in the past, sort of in the late 90s. And that's sort of in our central Dunedin site, which is just off the state highway there. And the other thing is the NZTA have a network of passive NO2, which provides like a monthly average, and that's like a screening thing, but they have that all over the country, so we can compare our data to other parts of the country as well.
Is it public?
Yeah, you can download it from the website, but probably because we're doing this NO2 monitoring in Dunedin, I'll probably include all of that in the next annual report, just so that we've got like a context.
Last question, if there is a community demand or need or perceived or otherwise, and this lady was really keen to get more monitoring, she wanted to move it. I said, you never want to move a monitoring site because you want the continuity. But I mean, how much are those new systems that you've got?
Oh yeah, so well, we hired these ones. They're quite cheap and we could probably hire them again. So we have been thinking about how we can use them again, definitely.
So people could in the consultation for the year plan say, we think there's an issue here that we would like to.
Yeah. The thing about these instruments is that they can be used for citizen science as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fantastic.
How much are they?
I think they're a couple $100. NIWA made these ones. But yeah, like I said, we didn't purchase these, we just hired them. Yeah, so very cheap.
Sorry, it's operational.
I have to say the air budget, Sarah runs her air program on a shoestring budget. And there's lots more we could do if we had additional resources. So we'll, look to how we can make sure that we get more longevity and can start to.
Just the citizen science things, you could get people to
Do their
buy
own.
their own and do
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
At that price, if they knew where to get them and how much they were and things.
Yeah.
We'll just go back to the sequence of speakers.
Sorry.
Kate, you're all,
I'm all done, thank you.
thank you.
Great
All right.
answers, thank you.
Colin, Gretchen, Kevin.
I really enjoyed this report. Mr. Chair, I've just got a couple of questions if I can sort of feed them out. The first one is to get some type of context. Because I read this report and also on my phone, there was an ODT article about PM10. Yeah. And that, yeah, so where's that article from, the PM10?
Is that the one from today? Oh, the media release. Yeah, so that was the comms team just wanted to put out what our PM10 and our SOE network was doing this winter compared to last winter.
Yeah, no, that's good. But thank you for explaining that. Just a bit of context. So the PM10 looked at, I think, 4 key communities, Alexandra, Arrowtown, Dunedin, Moscow, and the headline was something along the lines of air quality has improved and complaints are down. And I think, and I think there was also a comment that the weather was a bit warmer. And I think to a certain degree that's been a little bit of the rhetoric that's been going on. But then you've provided this PM 2.5, which for me is, in areas that we haven't typically gone into, Harware and places like even Green Island, which we may have thought was North Dunedin, encapsulated by Dunedin and Port Chalmers and all these places. And the conclusion that you came to was that all but 2 did not meet the threshold. And that's really, really insightful. So I'm just wondering what that next step is. Like, this is a noting report. Certainly from my perspective, we need to go the next step and review, are these numbers real? Because I think you talked about was a 20% variability, this type of thing, and do we need to purchase more testing equipment, whether it's this low cost or whether we have to go to the high cost? There's a question. Do we, if we went down that?
The good thing about this report is that we monitored everything simultaneously. So we will be able to, in future, monitor, say, one site to standard or similar to or equivalent method standard to our SOE network, and then we'll be able to compare that. So if, say, we took the worst one like Harware and we got some exceedances next year, and then it would indicate how many exceedances we would have likely got in some of these other towns. So yeah, I think probably the best thing to do would be to do something like that. Yeah.
Because I mean, with work on the air plan, that's really, really appropriate. In the ODT report media release on PM10, it talked about compliance, and I think there were 6 infringement or abatement notices or something like this, and 4 of them were for outdoor burning, and another one was for a consent. So, like, the rubber hasn't hit the road in terms of what do we do about home heating. So ideally we make some traction on this, because the point is that the headline that air quality is improved and complaints are down. I think what this report is showing is that that is not necessarily true, and particularly so in our smaller communities. Is that fair?
I think the context is probably that in the areas that we monitor with a high level of accuracy and a high level of granularity,
Yeah.
the trend or what we observed in this last winter was that with slightly warmer temperatures and behaviours of our residents, we had slightly better air quality results in those sites that we monitor really frequently and accurately.
Okay.
This study looks at a greater spatial scale
Yeah.
and gives us contextualizes the information we collect all the time
Yes.
with regard to the rest of the airsheds that we manage. So it gives us some context. It gives us an idea of how representative some of the communities that we're monitoring in detail are with regard to the rest of the region. And it gives us some food for thought in terms of where we monitor in the future and how wide-ranging any plan provisions may be through that regional plan air review. And I think that's how this report should be treated, as context and provisions for making those sorts of decisions in future.
Yeah. And just a final question, if I may, Andrew, is so in terms of the PM10 results for those 4 towns, is it possible though that if we measure for PM 2.5 that the ODT headline might change? And it might change from air quality is improving to another headline that's more consistent with what we've found in the hinterland. And it mightn't be just a spatial issue, it might be a 2.5 issue.
No, you're correct. The PM 2.5 proposed limit for the NES, which hasn't yet been updated, but they proposed a limit of 25 micrograms per cubic meter, which is half of what the PM10 one is, which is 50. Given that most of our PM10 is PM 2.5 when it's home heating emissions, we will see more exceedances for PM 2.5.
Yeah, cool. So thank you for this work. It's timely.
You, Gretchen.
The first question is around what you said to do with the air quality monitoring program is on a shoestring. So we're doing sort of a bare state of the environment minimum at the moment, except for this work, which is a little bit of extra, and that's then leading to the question of, sorry.
I do apologise.
Yeah.
I thought it was off.
Yeah, the question is with annual planning timeframes coming up as well, are there opportunities, sorry, are there opportunities for us to think about doing some further investigative type stuff? And if we were, where would we focus our attention? You've mentioned something to do with traffic, so there's something happening there. We've also talked about worst places in Otago, and we're unsure exactly whether we've got those correct. We probably do, but we could always be checking to see whether things have changed. We've found some towns that also have issues potentially here beyond our normal monitoring network. So there's looking for problems, I suppose. Or then there's also, actually, do we know enough about practices and what's good and bad in general across air quality across the world and New Zealand, and that we don't need to be doing a whole lot of extra stuff. We need to be thinking in annual planning about implementation type of stuff. So sorry, that's a complex question, but are we doing enough at the moment? And if we were to invest something in air quality, where would it be?
So I might start with the annual plan type questions and then let Sarah answer the technical one. So Tom and I have already had a chat about what we'll need to support the annual plan review and implementation. One of those things when we bring issues and options papers will be, in essence, building on what we know around the world and New Zealand in terms of what does work and what doesn't. So reducing emissions from home heating is really challenging. And I know that lots of the modelling that shows it takes a really concerted effort. And so the range of options will be really significant, and we'll bring those to you. They obviously, the more you do, the more it costs. But Tom and I are absolutely having those conversations now with Sarah. Sarah's a bit hamstrung because she's got no policy people to help her kick off the air plan review at this point in time. But hopefully we'll get some people for her to work with very shortly. But I'll leave you to take the technical parts of corrections question.
Yeah, I think in terms of going forward, we were looking at monitoring for other pollutants, and NO2 is definitely on that list now. And yeah, PM 2.5, like we're still focusing on PM 2.5 and you know, getting ready for the NES to come out on that. But yeah, and all the other sort of investigative work was probably going to be around the air plan review. Yeah, so if we had budget, we would do outdoor burning maybe. What else has been on the list? We're kind of ticking them off actually. We did another investigation this year for how effective ultra low emission burners are in Arrowtown. So that report will be probably ready by the start of next year.
It's a really interesting report. So we've got burners installed, and there are people going in twice a day. Is that
So yeah, so basically it was monitoring the emissions of an ultra low emission burner directly from the burner itself inside people's homes in Arrowtown. So we got 7 volunteers from Arrowtown to undertake this work for about a week each. And yeah, so that will be really interesting. We just don't have any results just yet.
Look forward to the results when they come back to the table. You all set, Richard?
Yeah.
Kevin,
Apologies for the phone.
thank you.
Yeah, just following up from Councillor Scott in the first part, we still should be showing that we still could be showing that air quality is improving, but we'd have further to go to meet the 2.5 level, wouldn't we? So we've actually shown, so we still, but we've got a long, we've just got further to go now because we've changed that sequence, but that's, so the law says that, I think from the paper that any issue that we've got a, one of the any issue that is likely to exceed limits set out in the NESQ, right? And then we've done this testing and pulled up Lake Hawea, Lake Ranfurly, Oamaru with high concentrations. I have actually some, at first I've got to say thanks to the staff for using your very limited budget in a very good way to try and get something going. So I think so that's the next step to that is, what is, so I've probably got 4 questions, Chair. What is the real cost? What is the cost of a real monitor as opposed to this? I won't say cheap. I've said cheap. So to the cheap version, because, and I do call it cheap because you even say in your data that 29% of them were sort of only 50% valid data, and then 28% of them actually work pretty good. And I know you can compare that to other things, but to me that's simply not good enough.
Yeah.
But I appreciate what you've done with the budget you have though. So
Yeah.
what's the difference in cost for a kickoff?
So for a one of our SOE monitoring sites, it costs about $50,000 just for the site itself with the Portacom and the infrastructure that goes into it. And then the instruments on top of that are for PM10, it would be about $60,000 to $70,000. And yeah, the thing about those is that they're stuck in place. You can't move them around. So you're only gathering like information from where that is. And we do have sort of standard method equivalent monitors as well. Those are the ones in Cromwell, Clyde and Milton. And they are about $11,000 for the instrument. So they're but they're quite accurate, and we're quite happy with those ones. So yeah, those are the costs.
And just they also need people to
Great.
check them.
Yeah.
So we've got one air quality, well, we're about to get our air quality tech resigned, and we've got a new one due to start. But they've got a massive geographical area to cover as it is.
Yep.
So more sites to monitor will mean additional FTEs to monitor as well.
Yeah, but which goes back to the law actually says that if we suspect, if an area is likely to see, we actually have to be doing that, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And so when we do the air plan review, we gazette more air sheets, then they'll need a permanent monitoring site, and then we'll need to, so you'll see, upscaling of resources in terms of LTP budgets and annual plans to support that. Yeah, absolutely.
Can I just say what we've done in the past is that we group the air sheds into like groups. and then chose a key indicator site to monitor. And that's how we've gotten away with only having sort of 7 sites. So we can sort of say that, I don't know, South Dunedin is similar to Mosgiel, for instance. And so that's how we've kind of gotten away with it. Yeah, so we could continue to do that in future, possibly.
Yeah, because like you do say in paragraph 21 that data cannot be confidently compared with proposed limits. So what I'm saying is government's put, and I'm not disagreeing where we've got ahead with it. I'm just simply saying, well, is this not a case that we should, government has all of a sudden put this impost upon us? Should we not be going back to government and say, well, we're actually, here's the 26, is, you know, we might have 18 of those 22 areas that we've described at the moment that have to have the flash gear in them to do it properly. And government said we have to do it. Should we not be asking government for some funding?
That's not new. They're not new.
No, I know it's not new, but
and other regional councils have been monitoring all their airships.
yeah.
So I don't know that going to government and saying we haven't necessarily been doing everything we should is the best idea. We just need to build it into the funding, be clear about where our airsheds are, build it into the funding, and then implement it. So we can do that.
Right. So you've answered my second part to that question was what are other regional councils doing, and we're just a bit behind.
Yeah, we have the most airsheds out of the other regional councils. And so like I was saying, we grouped our airsheds, our gazetted airsheds are grouped 1 to 4.
Yep.
And so we monitor one proper SOE site in each of those. And that's how we report to, and that's how we account for what we're doing. But yeah, the other councils, they have way less polluted airsheds than we do. So Waikato has, I think, 20 airsheds or so, but only seven of them are polluted. So they only monitor 7.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. And you just have to keep an eye on the ones that you're not monitoring.
Thanks very much.
Gary,
Put some numbers down to it.
thank you, Gary, Hillary, and Carmen.
Thank you. Look, really interesting report. Would it be fair to say, I know the others have touched on this already, but there has to be a degree of real concern around what conclusions you draw from this report, given it as a one-off snapshot. And there does seem to be real issues with this methodology, because when you look at the where the Odins have been positioned, a lot of them there's 3, say, per site or per town, and then some of them none have worked or only one has worked. And so accepting that very limited budget, and it's a relatively very cost-effective methodology, then until we actually do more of it, either get replicative years and see more accuracy or better data gathering from these instruments, that it'd be very challenging to draw conclusions from it now. Would that be a fair comment?
Yes, we haven't drawn conclusions from it for that reason, but we're using it to inform the year plan review. But what you might see is we might do some things like put some temporary monitoring sites in for 5 or 6 years post the year plan review to see whether it needs to have a permanent site. And we might have some certainty around other sites that we do need to make permanent. So this will be one piece of information we use to help assess our current and any future airsheds and whether we do or don't gazette them, and then how we manage it going forward. So it just, I guess, it says to us there are other tools we can use that help us to look at point in time, that help us make decisions on how we do additional point in time and how we build on that to make sure we get a better, more consistent picture.
Yeah, and I think a further framing would be this is an initial screening study that gives you a good snapshot of a large proportion of the region, and future studies will need to occur to help to continue driving the information forward. But Anita's 100% right. We haven't drawn a whole range of conclusions from the study because that's that first screen. We'll go through and look at the areas of concern in more detail over time.
So what hopefully it'll lead to is that in upcoming annual planning, we can look to potentially fund more. Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Hillary.
2 sort of related questions, and this is me having a Scottish approach to everything. In the study we're doing to see what emissions there are for an ultra low, whatever it is there a reason why we can't either use what the manufacturers say they do, or ask a government department who monitors people saying they're doing a particular thing for a product, do we need to go and reinvent that, considering that if somebody advertises as something, they presumably not only say it's ultra low, whatever it is, but they say what they mean by that. And even if there isn't rules about what they should be, there are rules about not advertising something that it isn't. So do we,
I'm very excited.
yeah, so that's one area, and a sort of related area is now that Waka Kotahi's gone way off fixing roads for traffic accidents and things, is there any reason why they aren't doing, or somebody else isn't doing, traffic air monitoring things, either on a national level or a government department level or something? So what I'm saying is, do we look and see, although we've got obligations, do we look and see what other people are doing, or whether we could get this information without us having to reinvent it? Is that those two?
Yes, yeah, I'll go over that. So NZTA do collect national data for NO2. That's available on their website, and they're constantly monitoring hundreds of sites around New Zealand just on a screening level. And they do a lot of work around cars. They're trying to introduce more hybrids and electric vehicles and stuff at the moment. And as for the way that burners are tested before they come on the market, they have to adhere to New Zealand Australian standards, is like 4012 and 4013 in terms of emissions. But however, to become an ultra low emission burner, they have to also pass the ECAN CM1 test, and that is testing that's slightly different to the NZ test in that it tries to test things under what they consider more real life conditions. So all these tests are undertaken in the lab, but the CM1 test doesn't use, I think just the wood they use is sort of more like what you would really use in your wood burner, but that it's still undertaken in the lab. So what we've been finding, other councils who have tested ultra low emission burners and non-ultra low emission burners are finding that the way that it's used, how they're burning, what wood they're using, how often they're putting it on, how they're using their airflow changes the emissions in it that comes out. So it can be quite hard to find volunteers for this work. So it's only been done 3 other times for ultra low emission burners in the country. And so those 3 times have maybe been about 15 burners in total. So our 7 tests will add to that knowledge base. So that's the reason why we do it, is because real life emissions are different from lab emissions.
Seems an expensive thing to do, or that we could get together with everybody and just say, do we want to do 30 in New Zealand or something?
Yeah.
Are we, we don't want to be doing more than our share of the heavy lifting in any of these ways, and we want to share information, of course, everywhere.
So we do share what other councils do, and that's wrong. There are other councils that do other work that we don't do, so we absolutely do our, it's about sharing, and Sarah's part of the special interest groups. That's all regional councils, the air quality group. They get together, and so we know what's happening around the country. So it does require us to do a little bit as well.
That might be something that could be reported to council, because it's how we, like people accuse New Zealand Defence Force of not doing our share of defending the Australasia and whatever I'm just saying that if we're doing other things, it would be really good to have something coming to council saying, here's our collaborations, or here's our whatever they are. This is what we're doing for it. And this is where they're. Would that be something that could be done? Or?
Yeah, we could do. A lot of the other councils focus on things that aren't necessarily relevant to Otago, though. There's a lot of other issues, especially around traffic or the port up in Tauranga, or like agricultural spraying and things like that. So yeah, there is a lot of stuff going on.
Council to know, and probably for ratepayers to know what. I mean, somebody must have a list somewhere, or that special interest group must
We have, I think there's about 15, 16 special interest groups across a range of topics that OSC is involved in.
Anyway, I'm
So
just,
from a wide range, but we can probably in the next triennium bring a paper on what the groups that we're involved in. I think. I think
I
there's
just
8 or
think that
9.
maybe the council might be interested in, it's not asking you to reinvent anything, it's just asking you to collect together what you're already doing, so as that we know that you, yeah.
Thanks, Hilary. I'll go to Carmen, then I'll come back to Brian and Kate.
Um,
Carmen.
Oh, thank you, Chair Noon. I just wanted to ask, going back to sort of Kevin was asking about pricing and things like that. Once you have a monitor, if you like, in place, can you then move it, or is it quite rigid? One, like, I know it sounds ridiculous, but some places it can be also quite windy, but are they quite a robust little machine?
It depends on the monitor. Oh, are you talking about the Odins from this report?
Yes.
Yeah.
And monitor in general too, if I may ask both, please.
So for our key indicator monitors, so that's Dunedin, Mosgiel, Arrowtown, Alexandra, they can't be moved. For the Clyde, Cromwell and Milton monitors, they can be moved. You don't necessarily want to move them around too much. You don't really want to lose the continuity of your site, but those instruments would be perfect for, say, like a mobile site for investigating, short things over one winter. And yeah, same with these ones as well. They can be moved around. Yeah.
Thank you, much appreciated.
Kate.
Thank you for answering all my questions before. And I just want to get a context of the plan as we roll it out. And I've gone back because we haven't done the strategy in my time on council, but I've now gone and looked at that as well. And there is actually an outcome 5, air pollution for traffic and industries, but there's no actions under them. And so what comes first as we explore this? Because you don't know what you're going to get sick of if you're not monitoring for it. And understanding, do we develop the air plan and then the air strategy, or does the air strategy and some of our measuring and monitoring inform the air plan?
So we actually programmed for the air plan and strategy to work side by side and develop together. So that's the intention, is that they go together so that we can make sure we line everything up.
So there will be a review of the strategy as well.
There should be a review of the strategy as well. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian, last question.
Yeah, thank you. Just in relation to this air plan that's been potentially developed, and following on from Hilary's question about the burners and testing and so on, are we building up some type of awareness of how much coal is an issue? How much, is coal being burnt in these communities? Because my sense is sometimes it's a bit we can go around the shortfall of the burners in terms of, is it wet with this, dry with this type of thing, and that might impact on actually what's coming out the chimney. But as soon as you put coal in, you're going to blow the numbers. Are we building up some type of database about that, understanding there? Because ideally, if it's an issue, we do actually stop burning.
So for coal, the only information we have is from the census, and that is what kind of wood burner you have in your house. And I did an analysis on it for the SOE report that came out last year, and that showed that coal burners existence has gone down quite a lot since 2006 or 2001, like whichever census you want to take it back to. So in Dunedin, we have about something like 4% of the burners in Dunedin are still coal. It's higher in Clutha. I can't remember the number, but there's high percentage of burners in Clutha. But in places like our Zone 1 towns, Central Otago, there's very little to no coal burners there.
Yeah, but you might find, for example, in Dunedin, that 4% of the burners weren't able to burn coal, but they're actually contributing 8% of the pollution.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And at some point, we're just going to get serious about this and sort it.
So we will bring you a range of options when
Yeah.
we're doing the air plan review. One of them will be around home heating, and it will have everything from how we manage what goes into the fire to what types of appliances you can put into, you know, what kind of support you might give the community to transition away.
Cool. Thank you.
Yes, you have to move.
Look, I am really happy to move, and it's a really enlightening report. And as you do your papers, it'll be really good to, yeah, if you look at what Cozy Homes is being done in the area and what Eco, I think it's taking over Cozy Home or working hand in hand with them, what they're actually doing in home heating and home insulation, because this is a cold part of the world. Well, I won't say that publicly because I want people to come and live here, but it is a cold part of the world. We've got to heat our homes. But we've got to do that efficiently in the best possible way. Very good report. Happy to move.
Thank you. Second correction, any speakers? The only comment I would make was that with air quality, I think we've all got a responsibility, no matter whether we're the regulator, whether you're a commercial, industrial, business, landowner, residential activity or whatever. I mean, collectively, we've all got a responsibility to consider the environment going forward. So we can't do this on our own. I'm trying to say. Any other speakers? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you, Anita. Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you, Tom, and thanks for being with us as well. So moving on to the second item, which is the Queenstown and the Dunedin patronage report. This is for the report on the public transport, bus and ferry and total mobility services for the 2022 financial year. Welcome to Julian, implementation lead, and Doug, manager of transport, and Gavin Rotions, BM. Welcome, gentlemen. Doug, we're in your hands, and Julian. So,
thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have the report with you, obviously. Some of the things to note is the previous 12 months, Dunedin patronage is down as well as Queenstown. That of course includes low patronage data in a certain period. The previous 12 months, still down compared to pre-COVID. Queenstown significantly so, 45% down on patronage from pre-COVID. This is recovering slightly, however, we're still experiencing some significant reliability issues in Queenstown, again related to resourcing. A bright note is the ferry patronage continues to rise, which is great. Other than that, if you have any questions, Julian is here to help you with.
excellent. Julian, did you want to add anything at all yourself?
Nothing specific. Look, I think people might want to know a bit about missed trips and reliability and so on, so I can talk to that if required, but happy to take questions.
Please go, Hillary.
Relating to that, I've got two questions, but relating to that, are we moving towards calling missed trips from the hub within the timeframes on our contract?
So if a trip that's operating runs later, I think contractually it's 15 minutes late, then it's in terms of a contractual abatement, then it would still count as a missed trip. And always has done.
And no, it hasn't done because it's been 3 or 4 minutes early and 3 minutes late or something.
Oh, sorry,
Not so long ago.
5 minutes, not 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Or 5 minutes early as well. 1 minute early, 5 minutes late. That's the correct one. Yeah.
What I'm asking is, I understand that
the
buses that run through the hub and out the other side, which turns out to be like Shell Hill to Ropo, for example, aren't late unless they leave Shell Hill outside that time, not unless they leave the hub outside that time.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, so contractually, it's monitored on the time that it leaves the terminus, so the starting point. Yeah.
So are we doing anything about that?
So on all our new contracts, we, including the one that just been tendered, there are multiple timing points.
Right.
So, and some different KPIs and things. So yeah, we're looking to back date those into all of the contracts. So we have I think 5 routes that are part of the new contract that goes live next month. same as existing routes that include that specific route you're talking about. Those routes actually have, I think, 5 timing points, which would be monitored at. So, you'd have Shill Hill, then maybe the Oval, the Bus Hub, somewhere along George Street, and then Opaho. So effectively the monitoring will be and reliability will be monitored more strongly than currently.
So it's excellent, and so there'll be a missed trip if they're not on time at those points.
Yeah, 5 different points. Yeah, aside from if there are a genuine reason that isn't out of the operator's control. So at the moment, for example, we have with George Street, I think St Andrew Street's closing tomorrow, and in about 2 days' time, I think the entire network in the central city is taking some kind of really difficult detours that are difficult to manage. So you've got to take a bigger loop around a huge circle around the Octagon. So those sort of things. But other than that, as long as if it's within the operator's control, then yeah, it's monitored in the same way.
That's lovely, thank you, because that's a really significant thing for the people who think of themselves as catching a bus from the hub, not from wherever the terminus was.
Yeah, it was actually it came out of a previous council discussion. I can't remember who it was, but someone had actually mentioned requested we would put in additional timing points, and then when that contract goes live, retrospectively doing the same for other contracts. So it's something we enacted as from something a few meetings ago.
Excellent, thank you. The second question I have, and I'm very heartened by that, because both that it's responsive to people and that it's a good thing to do. Is since what we seem to be concentrating on with public transport is mode shift, do we know what the mode shift position is for these figures? I mean, if you say, for example, that Queenstown patronage is 17% down or 7% down or something, what does that, it sounds like it's probably just a whole lot of tourists aren't arriving on a plane and going into from the, that's the sense that you'd get if you spent time in Queenstown. So do we know what proportion, therefore, what mode shift we're getting for those? Is that a clear question? Sounded a bit garbled. Sorry.
Yeah, if you're talking about people switching between cars and walking or
yes,
bikes.
I'm saying, are we still getting even if our use of the buses is 20% down, is use of cars 20% down as well? So have we retained our mode?
I see what you mean. No, we don't. We haven't looked at that data. I think it would be something that would be difficult to measure in Dunedin, and probably quite easy to measure, to draw some comparisons in Queenstown because of the nature of the market there. In terms of, as you said, tourism and the effect of tourism on general road transport and other modes of transport versus, and the same on public transport. But it's not data we've looked at so far.
So we're not into mode shift. I mean, I thought nationally, and what we were following was that we wanted to get something percentage of trips taken by bus, and you can't do that unless you know.
Well,
can you, or if I?
Yeah, at the moment we don't have data showing a direct correlation between X amount of people have stopped using their car and moved onto the bus. The data we have shows what the patronage is on the bus. I agree, it's something we could look at. What other areas, if they're doing something similar, how if there's a measurement that can be applied to that. We're working with DCC on some modelling and stuff around that, but it's not data we have in answer to your question.
Sorry, Julian. We could probably track some of that data down if we talk to Waka Kotahi. I know they do vehicle counts on motorways and things, so it might be worth investigating.
Yeah, and look, DCC have been doing some cordon counts and things like that, which we've been assisting them on. We've been supplying data for various different projects to do with uses on certain corridors, time taken to travel on a bus, and they'll compare it to a car from X to Y on, say, Princess Street or George Street. But those are ongoing things. We don't have that data at the moment.
Oh, well, it's something to look forward to, because otherwise we just can't involve ourselves in the national, 20% by 2037 in June or whatever the target probably is. Can we? I mean, we can't engage with it until we stuff. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Kate and Brian.
That's a really good question because it is a measure of the regional land transport plan that we should be able to capture somehow. So a great question. I'm going to go back to trips, and it's the language we use in this report that literally tripped me up several times. A missed trip could be one that doesn't go at all because there's no driver.
Yeah.
And that is it's the whole route.
Yeah.
And equally a route that and if is it 1 minute early and 5 minutes late?
Yeah.
Well, I think I just want that would if at the starting point it's 5 minutes late or more, it's a missed trip in that definition.
Yeah.
Right. I think that, and then we use the words passenger trip, which so and it makes it look like there's only 50 people. The word 50 missed trips looks like 50 people didn't get on the bus almost in my mind because it's a trip each person.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah. So looking at paragraph 12, and this is where I was getting really possibly frustrated. It's the best word. 50 missed trips, if I don't know how many trips there are a day.
Yeah.
And it's fine that you then add them all up over the March. How many trips are there a day on this measure?
Around 1,000 in Dunedin.
Okay.
Yeah, in Queensland, I think it's around 450-ish.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, what's going to happen with what you've changed in the contracts, well done, sounds really reactive, is that the missed trip may now be part of that route. Could if the bus is held up, but appreciating Transport in Dunedin at the moment may well make that happen, and I'm sure there's a mechanism. Are those timing points going to be in the transit app that people can see that this is, because this is the very reliability data that people want to know that it's leaving, or maybe not in transit app, but is there some surety that we are tracking that stuff and how are we going to get that recorded?
So that members of the public can see it?
Yeah.
Look, we've talked, I think 2 meetings ago about the possibility of actually, I'm quite happy to do it, putting information out for the public. Would actually probably help in terms of media inquiries and things, so people can see how reliable different services are, or where there's congestion and that sort of thing. More than happy to progress that. At the moment, we have a lot of information in these reports, and technically they're in public because the report gets public. But there's often huge agendas, and people, the average person, if I didn't work for the council, I wouldn't necessarily know them. How to easily find the data.
And it's actually not for that reason, Julian. It's the fact is that if we're finding consistently that every Monday or every day of the week, this particular trip cannot get through Dunedin because of congestion, especially now, then why wouldn't we change the timetable? Because it has to get to that point that we need to be reliable. And I appreciate no one wants to change the timetable, but actually there's no point promoting something that we just know isn't going to work.
No, you're actually absolutely right. So one of the projects, and we had a meeting about it earlier this week, we're working on is how we monitor using technology the way the services operate, because it may be that the operator themselves or a particular driver or a particular time of the day is the reason. It may be that the timetable was the reason. There was a decision made some years ago to generally run a sort of flat clock-based timetable. So the bus goes at 10 o'clock, 10:10, 10:30, running across the day, and sort of off-peak run the bus at the same time as the peak. So the congestion probably when those decisions were made was a little bit lighter than it is now. And there's data support. There may be data to support making those changes you suggest, congestion related timetable changes.
I don't want to, I don't want to find a solution possibly. I think what we also don't message particularly well, and this is that whole transport as a whole network thing. I was doing some population figures the other day. We've had a 10% growth in since 2007, in 15 years. We've got no more room on the roads, in fact less in many ways, because we've added cycleways and probably more car parking, and yet people don't get that has a direct effect on their transport timeframes and why we should be encouraging more buses. It's a roundabout circle if we don't keep on promoting why these effects will be cumulative. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Kate. I actually thought that was interesting yesterday as well, that we heard that 96% of the time a car doesn't actually get used and is just parked somewhere and at an expense. Even a garage is an expense, actually.
Indeed.
So look, I think we can do a bit more around that. Communications with the community around the cost of owning a car and running a car, comparing it to public transport. I mean, it'd be quite good if families started focusing on having one car instead of two. That type of thing. We could start telling that story, that it's actually an expensive piece of capital equipment if you're only using it 4% of the time, and then paying for it when it's parked somewhere.
Great.
Thanks, Pim. Thanks, Kate. Brian.
Yes, that's interesting. Maybe I should be borrowing the neighbour's car.
Tell them first.
Buses and so forth. What do you think?
Tell them first. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't expect a free car park when you get here. It shouldn't be.
What I find particularly exciting, and I've said this before, is the real-time information. And the report on paragraph 77 and 78 talks about the accuracy of the real-time. In Queensland, the net has been increased with data being derived from a hierarchy of bus services. So if one technology falls down, there's a hierarchy from including E-road and Wi-Fi and third. I'm not sure, but well done. And I spoke briefly to Julian before in the corridor. He shouldn't have walked past about the real time and the rollout, and you pointed out that on your phone, if you download a phone app, you can see all the bus routes. You can see all the buses, and it's really excellent. Of course, not everybody has that that technology, even though I congratulate it. All the young people certainly will.
Yeah.
And you also talked about the what you can put at a bus shelter. What do you call that? The
e-stop. Yeah, the solar powered one.
Yeah, the
the
solar
e-stop.
powered.
Yeah.
That actually will say to you in big print that the next bus on this route is in 3 minutes time.
Yeah.
Or hang on a minute, and one after that's in 20 minutes time.
Yeah.
So if you want to go and have a coffee, you hop on the bus now, and you can really make it part of your lifestyle, and for those that don't have an app or do have an app and can't be bothered, they can just turn up the bus shelter. And I reckon that's really, we're wanting a shift, a positive shift in terms of the service we're providing. And I actually think if we can get those onto our bus shelters and certainly trial them for a start, and let's just see what the community feedback is. And I think you suggested that the cost was something like $3,000 for the whole unit for a bus shelter.
Yeah, with a small solar panel, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and how many bus shelters did we have?
I'm not sure about how, shelters off the top of my head, about 300 in
300.
Dunedin and maybe 90 in Queenstown, but we have something like 900 bus stops in, if you look at the entire wider area of the network.
Yeah. But is there anything that, from a governance perspective, that we can assist in terms of that rollout, or is there already a budget there to do that for some key routes? Because I think it would be some really positive feedback on it.
Yeah, look, I agree. So there's sort of 2 or 3 different work streams we're working on that, including some potential funding from various sources that might accelerate that program.
Yeah.
The stop I showed you, which is just being maintained, just a minor issue on the back of it, that actually came out of a request from the Peninsula Community Board due to the Peninsula Road widening projects, and we used it and effectively coming to the end of a trial of using it, but we're going to leave it there. Of firstly solar panel, so in different sizes of solar panel, how they're going to how much energy they're going to give out to power these e-stops that use a Kindle type paperwhite technology that doesn't require much power. And it's quite interesting because what we found out is if you take the solar panel off, it runs for about 2 months without needing any power. But the capital cost of installing it, not having to dig into the ground and connect to electricity and all that, actually makes it very, very cost effective. So there are a number of avenues, some of them kind of commercially sensitive, but around how we deliver what you see on the transit app onto those screens, and again rolling that out across the city. What it means is, we have paper timetables, they're all well and good, they just show you the schedule, and particularly in the current environment, they're not a lot of use. Those machines have the ability to display different types of information as well. So yeah, it's something we're looking at extremely keenly.
Because like I work out that if you're going to put them on 300 sites, you know, $3,000 each, it's $1 million project. But I think the output and the community's feedback could be a real push forward. I mean, do you have that $1 million in your budget?
We don't have a budget to put e-stops everywhere. What we do have is an infrastructure budget which covers everything from bus shelters to e-stops and any other associated infrastructure. So at the moment, pending some other projects and things that are going on, it's part of our general infrastructure program. But before we start installing them, we want to just make sure we can get that real-time push to those screens. We've tested it in the bus hub on and off, just using quieter hours, switching it on across, because the same stops are in the bus hub. We've got 10 screens there, so we're switching on and off and seeing what happens and just ironing out some issues around that. But yeah, the beauty of the screens is you can show you information, the real-time information, both at the same time. We've got one allocated to test at the airport in Queenstown, who we're seeing on Tuesday to talk about that. I think one's up with QRDC to go in at Arthur's Point to try in a low light. So Mac Bay's got lots of light, it's out in the open. Arthur's Point at the end of the route's pretty dark. So again, just testing different stuff to make sure the whole thing works properly.
Cool. And is there a time frame for maybe an initial rollout? I won't commit to a specific time frame right now, but I'd like to think we'd have a number out this year.
Brian, I couldn't agree with you more, Brian. This is the way that we actually manage people's expectations, actually, and it's what technology allows us to do in so many parts of the world. You know, I remember the first time I went to China and I could see how many seconds before the light would turn green at an intersection. It's a bit similar to waiting at a doctor's surgery and being told how long the wait time is, as opposed to what we used to have to do, which is just wait forever. So look, this is the way we manage customer expectations, and it's just a customer service, and we have to deliver it the same as Wellington does, same as Christchurch does, and we'll have to bite the bullet and fund it.
Cool.
Thank you. Kevin, Gary, Michael, Deeker, Hillary, Kate.
I have got a quick. It's really interesting that we're going to hear government is sort of pushing the sustainable public transport framework. So that is really exciting. But and when I look at DCC at the moment, what a great opportunity they had was to, as they're fixing up George Street and doing all the work in George Street, they actually could have left one side of the road open and just had buses only going down it. And wow, that would have actually got people onto buses, I believe, but probably would have. So that was a great opportunity missed. Technology managing people's expectations. And I think that's absolutely spot on. But the whole key to a bus service is the frequency, accessibility, sustainability, and probably most of all, reliability. And that's what we've heard again from the good people from both our contractors. So at the moment, look, I just see our staff doing a heck of a lot of very, very good work to try and improve the service, improve the routes, improving all this sort of stuff. But we've got two contractors that actually aren't delivering the service. And there's a lot of reasons why that's not being delivered, but that's the whole key to it. So why would I actually go sell my second car? And if I'm on or even my only car, if I'm sitting on the Zimmer frame in the Hall Road in Sawyers Bay and wanting to catch a bus, and the bus doesn't turn up, and I miss my doctor's appointment. So I keep my car, or at least I've got total mobility, I suppose, at least I can do that. So the whole key to me is around the reliability of the service. So with that in mind, we've actually reduced our service, and we've still got missed trips, and it would be good to do an analysis of those missed trips, I suppose. But so we've got to reduce service. Will I see in the next quarter in my report from Mr. Donnelly a reduction in the cost of my transport budget?
Can't answer the question about the transport budget, but there are contractual mechanisms for the amount of kilometres run and that sort of thing. So, if we pay for a number of kilometres, if the number of kilometres operated is less, then we get a credit or pay less. So there are, beyond that, in the public forum, not quite sure what I can say, but
Yep.
there are, in terms of the actual budget, it's not a question I can answer.
Yeah, Julian, I'm not going to be scared of talking about this in a public forum. We don't think our bus service is good enough at the moment. Kevin, you know that as well as I do. And there are reasons for it, and it's happening all over New Zealand. It's around lack of bus drivers. We heard about that yesterday. We've reduced our services. You've seen in this report that those reduction in services means that actually we're not missing too many trips in Dunedin, but we're still missing just as many trips in Queenstown as we were before we reduced the service. So we've got a real problem in Queenstown. Look, we're going to address these things. We have to. And we are going to work with our operators in partnership to make sure that we do exactly what you've just talked about. It's about service reliability. And ultimately, it's about getting more bus drivers. We're down on bus drivers like the rest of New Zealand. But you're not going to see a reduction in budget going forwards, because you're going to see an increase in budget, because these things cost money. We're going to have to pay bus drivers more. So currently, we've got reduced services. We've chosen, as you know, not to penalise operators for the same reasons that you heard yesterday. If we penalise them, they will find it even more difficult to employ drivers and train drivers. So we've got challenges in our bus services. We're well aware of them, and we absolutely are planning on addressing them in the near future.
Thanks, Pope, and thanks very much for the report. Very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you. Table or figure 18 has some interesting stats in it. The key ones shown here, complaints about drivers and then complaints about timeliness. But when you look at the difference in numbers of those, for April, May, June, for complaints about drivers, 37 complaints, 78 complaints about drivers, March, May, 80 complaints about drivers, June, 54. And then when you look at the complaints about timeliness, substantially less number. Is there any context around, like you would think the issues, if we're reducing our service, that the public and the bus users would be more grateful to see a driver there. So why are we seeing such that number of complaints about drivers themselves?
Yeah, a number of the complaints are related to firstly, there's a sort of national trend towards increasing number of complaints towards drivers. A number of them are related to, and I think this will possibly die down a little bit now, related to mask wearing. So the ability or inability rather of drivers to take control over people not wearing masks on the bus. So a driver can say, hey, please wear a mask, or if they sometimes they have a small stock of masks, here's a mask, but they don't have the ability to compel someone to wear a mask. And a large number of the complaints that we get are around mask wearing or lack of understanding over the fact that some drivers have an exemption and don't have to wear a mask. Some of those exemptions are relatively simple ones, like if you wear glasses and they get fogged up by wearing a mask, then you're not compelled to wear one. So there's a large number of complaints about that sort of thing. We have some complaints which I think are related to driver behaviour, driving too fast or driving in a way that is perceived by the passengers not to be safe. Fortunately, the operators themselves are quite strict on that kind of behaviour. The systems they have, there are a number of systems. One's called E-Road, I think, and they have the ability to dwell down even to the level of G-force that's occurring when a bus goes around a corner, and incidences where there's heavy braking and things like that. So they have the tools to be able to take action if there is a incident where a driver is at fault and so on. So I'd say in terms of the biggest trend, it's been the last few months has been around COVID and mandates around that. The drivers do get a bit of stick for buses being late or the network being late, or even just the reduced timetable or things generally that are out of their control. But generally they're doing, I think a very good job in really tough conditions. They are skilled operators, and probably a little bit underappreciated at the moment, but I'd say the mask wearing is probably the largest one. I'm quite happy at the next meeting to actually give a more detailed breakdown on that particular category. We've actually revised last month the way that we collect this data, so we can present it a little bit better with some more in a more useful way than just a table. So if you'd like that, I can sort of within those key categories put a bit more of a breakdown and an explanation of what the trends are.
That's great, thanks.
Thank you. Michael Decker.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Pretty much every point I wanted to make has been made by the last 3 or 4 speakers. Brian, Kevin, Pim, and most recently Gary. So I'll be very brief. I just wanted to say that this report itself is just about a model of best practice reporting to the council. I think it's exceptional in its use of graphics, its precision, its thoroughness, and I congratulate the team or the individual who was responsible for drafting that report. Top-rate stuff. The other point I wanted to make is that when we can beat ourselves to death over the current image of PT in both Dunedin and in Queenstown, but we've only got to look back a small number of years to a comparatively nightmare scenario where we had very poor quality vehicles, very limited services, very low patronage, around about 1 million passengers per year in Dunedin, compared with almost 3 million when the COVID crisis hit. So I think what we're looking at is a provision of service by the ORC, which is consistently underrated. The other thing I wanted to say is that the government's current commitment to the fare regime we have expires in January of next year, as I understand, and I think that's reinforced in this report somewhere. I think I read it there a couple of days ago. And I wonder whether the team has any plans for some kind of relaunch at the start of 2023, just to make the existence, the quality, and the comprehensive coverage of our PT systems better known than it is by many people because of the restricted timetables and the constant headlines about lost services and driver illness. A relaunch would be a very good idea at the start of next year, particularly if we have a new fare regime coming into play, whether it be higher fares or maintenance of the existing fares. So that's my question, Andrew. Are we planning a relaunch at the start of next year of our PT services?
So short answer right now is no. However, I think it's a really good idea. So a really good idea. So there's a lot of stuff that people don't know about the network, particularly people who don't use it, for the reasons that have been described previously by various people around the table. People might be reluctant to even try the service at the moment, and we need to. Right. Yeah, look, as you said, prior to COVID, we actually hit 4 million passengers, I think, just before COVID across both networks. After right. I think 5 years of sustained growth, and we were doing well. That doesn't mean we were doing everything right. The network was performing really well, as you said. There's a lot of work to be done, and COVID actually brings into focus, and the driver shortage at the moment brings into focus the fact that although we were doing very well and patronage was growing, there's a lot more that can be done, and technology is a real key, and the use of the core of that is real time and knowing where the bus is every 10 seconds, and that feeds into everything from what the customer sees on the street to the data and the reporting in the back end, and us actually being able to get a lot more detailed information about the network. We've had a couple of presentations last week about plans we've got to do this, so hopefully we'll be pushed through. So I think there'll be a lot more to come. But yeah, totally agree that I think a relaunch in January would be a fantastic idea if supported by.
Yeah, and if Julian and Andrew, if that coincided with the kind of conversation that Pim was having with Julian a few minutes ago about the crucial significance of real-time information, particularly en route, Pim's absolutely on the button with that. Many of us agree with that, I know. And if we could do a relaunch which incorporated making people aware that they can see straight away where their bus is, how long, what distance and time it is away, etc., that would be just brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks.
Thanks for those thoughts. Good, Julian.
Yep.
Hillary.
Sort of out of left field, do we own the bus stops?
No, we don't, apart from the bus hub.
So we pay for them to be built?
Yeah, so we work pretty closely with the DCC because we're sort of using it as the road controlling authority. They would install the bus stop and work with us on consulting if required to put the bus stop in, or putting infrastructure in an existing bus stop, and it's on charge to us. With the electronic stuff like the e-stops and so on, we tend to buy those directly ourselves. And
then they become part of a DCC asset?
Not the e-stops, but everything else. Yeah.
So if they're attached to a bus shelter, is the bus shelter owned by the DCC?
Yeah, effectively it's ownership's handed over and maintenance to the DCC, but we pay for that ongoing maintenance.
And we pay for the consents?
We don't believe we pay for the consents.
You mean nobody does, or you think the DCC does?
I think the DCC do, yeah.
I'm just trying to get my head around, because once they're there, if they're not ours anymore, that changes what we can do about them, or if we change them, we then have to build a new one and hand that one over to the DCC, because I presume they're all on road reserve.
Yeah.
Sorry, Julian, I was just going to say, look, the secret is that we work closely with DCC. We're supporting their own objectives here. If we're investing in these real-time devices, why wouldn't they let us put them on their bus shelters? And ultimately, this is about us working much more closely with DCC around the whole range of transport variables, which ultimately support public transport.
Yes, I wasn't expecting that for a moment that they would say not to. I just wanted to know if they become theirs because I understood the shelters became theirs as soon as they were built. And so I just wondered whether did all the paraphernalia we attached to them become theirs as well?
No, we'll have to maintain those assets.
Yeah, but as the C was saying, there are a number of projects we're actually already fairly advanced in terms of putting some e-stops in, not huge numbers, but the good example is the subject to everything going to planning consultations and so on, the tertiary precinct, where we're looking at a central, in between the poly and the uni, a centrally based large stop takes out some really, really old, sort of 20-30-year-old infrastructure and puts something in with, 2 e-stops on either side of the road, solar powered lighting, bike racks, possibly working with Neuron, the micro mobility company, who's also on our transit app, so you can have a bit more connectivity, and nearby an additional stop by the stadium to park and ride from the uni. So there's a lot of conversations around that involve infrastructure and the attractiveness of having e-stops, and particularly solar panel power, because previously it's something we would have to wire into the ground. At the moment, we're looking at how we can use solar power for lighting in shelters as well, rather than just the e-stops, because lighting and security is sort of another area we're looking at as well. Just trying to make the general amenities for bus infrastructure, rather than a pleasant looking but sort of rather old wooden shelter, something that's modern, attractive, accessible, and people would actually, if it's pouring rain and it's cold or it's dark, people might want to actually sit in there.
Just with your indulgence, one last question. I think the Minister Woods, said that he was doing something to allow people to more easily put in a variety of those sorts of things.
Yeah.
I understood we could. I think he was suggesting that he was going to change something so as that we wouldn't require a whole lot of consultation to do all these sorts of things. And I thought we just did them. Am I right? Or is there something stopping us do what you've just described, like putting in a stop or taking out a stop, or do you seem to think there was something getting in the way of people doing that, and he was going to reduce or eliminate that thing that was getting in all of our ways. Does that ring any bell?
It's not something I'm aware of in terms of consulting for bus stops. Generally, they tend to be consultations or issues with putting bus stops tend to be more with having a structure like a shelter outside a residential area, so that they consultation jointly done between either DCC or QLDC and ourselves with the adjacent homeowners to go, hey, this is what's happening, and this is the reason why. So even though those authorities control the roads, and in theory, I believe you don't have to ask. It's a process that both the TAs have. So we follow those processes, and generally there has to be a sort of reasonably robust or reasonable objection to not having a bus shelter, on the road reserve or on the sidewalk or whatever, rather than I just don't want a bus stop there. I think
Just do the reasonable,
yeah,
the consultation with people would be reasonably affected, and we just talk to them because we talk to them and try and get a good result, not an official sort of process that makes it take a whole lot longer or anything.
There are other issues as well, such as if you're putting in or revising or renewing an existing stop, it'll be different for something completely new where you're taking into account parking, again, where we have to work closely with the DCC. Most of the time, that would have to go through a parking bylaw committee. Which is why we have temporary stops in place. So where there's an urgent need to put in a bus stop, or move a bus stop because of a safety issue, we may put a temporary bus stop in, put the old one out of commission. That temporary bus stop won't become permanent until it's gone through the bylaw committee to allow the removing of the parking. One of the things we're really keen on, and it's for the benefit of passengers, particularly those with accessibility issues, and bus drivers as well, is Queensland's slightly different because we've basically had a ton of stuff built in, between 2010 and 2020, when standards were more highly developed. Dunedin's got a lot of shelters that, bus stops that date back 20, 30 years. A bus stop is supposed to be around 42 meters long, with sufficient space for a bus to be able to enter and egress and come parallel to the curb so that people can get on and off properly. Particularly, I think we were the first region to have a fully accessible fleet. Bus lowers, ramp comes out, for example, people on a walking frame or using a wheelchair, or who just need to walk up a ramp, have the ability to alight easily. Now with some of the old infrastructure, and it's another area we get a lot of complaints from, back of the bus is sticking in the road or can't pull into the curb. That's part of the reason for having to go through these committees and going through a formal process, because it may involve taking out 5 car parking spaces, which is a sensitive issue for a lot of people.
Thank you.
Kate, then Gretchen, and we'll wrap things up.
You've got a paragraph that talks about, number is 96, and sorry, I started off with the questioning and I didn't go right to the report. It says July 2018, I presume that's actually 2019, but the comparison of figures, 2019 would have been your last. So paragraph 96, Dunedin, July 2022 patronage at 194,544 passenger trips is 99.6% of the last pre-COVID comparable month, which would have been July 2019.
So the last full, the report basically works on financial years, so July to June. And the last full pre-COVID year, I think, was July 2018 to June 2019.
Oh, so but this is July to July month. Sorry.
Yeah.
So and we didn't have it in 2019. So so you've taken that figure.
So what
the last pre-COVID year? It's not pre-COVID month.
That's right. Yeah. So what we're that's month on month. So that's a single month. July being the first month of this new financial year. The data was available at the time of the report, so we put it on rather than just have the full.
And that should be a really good story. 99.6, we've bounced right up, and the reason, and so I just want to highlight it in general, if we were only looking at COVID as a factor, and actually in this we do tend to look at COVID for the reasons you talked about, masks and
Yeah.
everything. I just wanted to highlight that I think we should be nuancing it, and you talk about the school buses,
Yeah.
because we've got picked all of those up.
As we've picked some services up, yes.
Some
Yeah.
services up, sorry. And the other one is the disposable income has, for a lot of people, gone down.
Yeah.
So we should have in theory picked up some.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I suppose, I'm just wondering, we talk about pre-COVID all of the time and
Yeah.
whether we need to nuance slightly that the opportunities are much greater now with those other factors.
Yeah, I think the pre-COVID year, it's in there. I mean, all the years are in there, so we can compare to the other years as well. But because of the number of lockdowns, periods
Yeah.
of free fares, the introduction of the B card, and things that are happening, that 2018-19 is the last, what I would call a clean year of data, where there weren't any interventions or anything that will, prevent.
Yeah.
Ideally, if the last 3 years have been similarly clean years, you'd have a really good comparison. So it's really there. And again, it was a request some time ago to show, well, before these interruptions, what was our last full year of data, which was our highest point, I think, before various things came in. So in answer to your first question, it is a good result, because that for Dunedin, it shows that, we're almost at 100% of the same period in the last pre-COVID year. But it's why the Queenstown comparison becomes quite important, because although July in isolation compared to the last 2 or 3 years in Queenstown performed really well, we had a really strong month in July. A lot of tourists coming in, way busier than it used to be. Had some communication with the airport, really happy, showing us these photographs of queues of people getting the bus and so on. So compared to the last 2 or 3 years, it's been really, really good. But actually, if you compare to full year's performance up to end of June, so that 2018-19 year, we're about 45% down on patronage. So we're recovering, but compared to the glory years of pre-COVID of 2018-19, Queenstown is probably not the right analogy, but Queenstown's been hit quite strongly by, and a lot of it has been driven by the border closures.
Yeah, I do. It's fine. It's just that you say comparable month. It isn't the pre-COVID comparable month, and that's where I got confused. Sorry. Yeah, and I get where you're coming from now.
Thank you, Gretchen.
It would be remiss of us not to come back to the actions register that we spoke of earlier in this meeting, which, there's one there that, based on a previous patronage report, we had transport staff were requested to provide a media briefing to the ODT and other outlets regarding public transport issues. So, at the moment, we have a lot of attention on the bus service. We can't escape that. That is also obviously an opportunity, and it's one that we have been taking as well. But I think we need to grasp that. We've got issues at the moment that are right out there in terms of governance and TAs versus ORC. So there's a lot of discussion around that, and we do need to be part of that at the moment in the public side. We need to be talking today, like we have, about the existing partnerships that we actually have, because we have got some really good work happening in Queenstown and Dunedin, and actually with other TAs as well, discussing where we could get to. So that's something that needs to be discussed. In the future though, hey, we're really open, aren't we, at the ORC, to having further discussions, and it's election time, so it's a challenging time for us to say exactly where we're heading, but hey, our ears are definitely open on that one. And we are obviously very open to having friends who pull levers at wherever they are, whether they're Kotahi, whether they're TAs, we can work together to make a difference, and that's what we want. So we want to be spreading that message. Reliability we've talked about, and hey, that's right out there too, so we need to be talking about this, and this is a report here as part of that picture, but we need to, I think, really hold on to that and make sure that we are dealing with the media on that one. We've had some good news talked about today. We've heard Pim on drivers, and actually we've just got to deal with that. And that's not alone, but with our bus owners. Then we have plans for real-time displays at shelters. Awesome, really good. That's amazing. We didn't actually know that, but that is fantastic that that's going to happen. Let's talk about that. Then we've got the issue of actual patronage numbers down with the bums on seats issue that we've had here today. I wonder if confidence has been down too. Yesterday marked a momentous occasion when masks came off and our society's starting to think again about, hey, what is the future going to hold for us? Because I think probably some of those numbers of reduced patronage were people that used buses and didn't jump into cars as an alternative. I think they stayed at home. Some of those people, and yeah, they went to the supermarket at least often, they stayed at home to work, whatever. It's changing. So getting confidence, we need new people to be confident. So retraining people. How do I get on a bus? Hey, some people have never done it. How do I use apps, etc.? How do I feel really confident? So that relaunch idea, Michael Decker, is really important. Let's think about that and let's talk about that. But do we wait for a relaunch to start talking about all this stuff as a council, or do we do that now? Because now is when the buzz is happening and it's an opportunity rather than something to sit back down on and shy away from, I think. When there is conflict or when there is issues, you can turn that around positively, I think, and we need to. So I think that idea of, it may not be a media briefing, but there's certainly going to be stuff coming out about this paper for a start. We need to get on top of that rather than just wait for that. But I think it's wider as well about some of the positive stuff that's come out of today. So sorry, that's probably more of a speech than a question, but the question then is, I guess, media briefing. Do you want to comment on that as a yes or no, or maybe at this point, or waiting for a relaunch next year?
I think the seeds need to be sown in a progressive way. I think the media briefing, if we have some good news in terms of the reduced timetables coming off, i.e. we have sufficient drivers, the operators confirm they can run it. That's the pointy end of that.
Yeah.
It's a very slow, staged, good news story that we need to do. So we grab those little bites, lift it up a wee bit, another little bite. So we need to work quite close with the operators and make sure we have a cohesive plan to do that. And obviously our comms team, the transport team, and so on. So it'll take a number of weeks to get that together, but I think it's a very wise idea that we just, it's not spinning it, it's telling them the good news stories that people need to know. And you're right.
And the fact some of it is bad, but we're going towards good.
I think it's the best approach. Yes, this isn't very good, but this is what we're doing about it. So those are the sort of stories we make. And also I think your point is well made that we're not exactly sure. I mean, we don't have data on people, on user behavior that's really reliable. And I think that's a gap in the knowledge we have. And it's framed by why aren't people getting on buses? Willingness to use service, those sort of things. And that's all information we don't really have and we don't pursue. I think it'd be very wise to do that in the future. So yes, no, point well made, Councillor D.
I think the point you made on actually how to get on a bus sounds like quite a small thing, but it's actually quite a big issue. It's not just, there's a perception, it's just maybe for people who are maybe a little bit older, haven't used the bus before, but it's actually a barrier for young people as well. We've had discussions with the large educational facilities in Dunedin. And in fact, at one point, I think year before last, we ended up doing a demonstration, parked a couple of buses up, closed the street in South Dunedin, and actually had some live people actually getting on and off. It's kind of like I'd equate it to if I was to travel to France tomorrow and want to use the bus. If you've ever used the bus in a foreign country or train, particularly in Europe, there's a significant difference compared to what you might be used to, and it's not obvious what you actually have to do. And if I arrived in Dunedin right now, we have a lot more resources and things, and we have the B card, and it's a lot easier than it was years ago, but it's not as obvious as it might appear to people who already use the service.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Carmen. It's last question, Carmen.
Yes, but it is a little question, Chair Noon, but it's also a little bit of a statement, if I may. I think Councillor Robinson has a really good point there. It's basically hitting the reset button and go, but you know, I think you don't probably have to wait till next year. I think you've got some great opportunities to grab right now. I noticed a couple of elderly ladies said to me the other day that they'd love to get on the bus. They're not techno savvy. They don't know how to do the B card. And one of them said, well, actually, I got halfway through it and then I got a bit stumped. And she said, I wish there was a little video that just told me how I had to do it. And I just would have followed it and it would have been tickety-boo. That's a cool thing that we incentive. I think that could be straight off the cuff right now. And maybe, like you say, how we message the masks, because that actually was something these two elderly ladies said to me, that they hadn't had COVID. That avoided it, and now they are quite worried because, you know, the masks aren't on, and just those sorts of little things. I mean, I didn't think of it like that. We're flipping it on its head, I know, but it is something to be aware of. That could be something too to you know, from now on we look at the patron numbers, and is that a reason why our elderly folk aren't getting on the bus, for example, because they haven't had COVID, and now they actually are quite worried because, you know, we've had a bit of a mode shift, if you like. Excuse the pun, but I think there's so many great opportunities for us, and I can see Pim nodding in the background, and I just think I think this is our time to shine. Thanks for that.
Thank you. We note the report, and moved by Kevin, seconded by Hilary.
Just a week, one week comment. I just wonder whether we do need to have our contractors being more part of telling the story of the problems that are happening. At the end of the day, I think, and our discussions with them yesterday, they're actually very positive working with us. So I think if they could also help paint that picture would be really good. So the thing that I see missing from this report, and you're offering a service and working really hard to do it. If we had so obviously what we want is no COVID. We want a full complement of drivers. We want full technology. And we want all e-buses. The problem is you haven't put that date down, Julian. Did you have a date? And your job will be quite easy then.
Sorry,
I'm only having on.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Look, thanks very much for the report. And the day that happens, I think we could all pop some corks. But great work and happy to move.
Excellent. Thank you, Hilary.
Good report and everything, and it's good to know where things are going, and some of the things are in good heart. I would caution two things for the future. One of them is that when we're putting out media releases and things, that we under promise and over deliver. We don't want to get out there and keep on the basis that it's a good news story saying things that just make people annoyed because we don't appear to be connecting with the reality that they are living. So I'm saying let's try and keep the good news coming, but only good news that is reliable and fits with people's expectations and understandings of what they're doing. The second thing is that I think we have in our midst the ability to find out why people get on the bus or why they don't, because we have a collective. We have our councillors, Queenstown Lakes councillors. We have the people who work for us and the people who work for Queenstown Lakes, all of whom we could ask why they do or don't catch buses themselves, what they would need to do to help them get on a bus. And we also could, I think, ask that selection of people whether they could ask one of their close relatives who perhaps isn't at work, either because they're retired or because they're a school kid or whatever. And so if all the people who work for us in Queenstown Lakes and the councillors in both could answer some questions around that and ask a close relative who is in a non-working category what their experience is, we could get a lot of information very quickly without doing anything terribly complicated at all, just saying, could you please, it would help us answer these questions. Because we keep imagining why people do or don't get on the bus. And round this table, we know some of why some of the people around here do or don't. But it would be good to get some answers to those. And we've got, thousands of people who we had access to. The third thing is, I love the idea that we're getting more understanding and spending more time with the people who are the drivers or the people who are the bus companies and things, and we all need to be around the table to understand the issues and to try and get better provision of PT services. But we should not imagine that we are in partnership with people who we contract. It's not the right relationship, because we need to be able to understand that we have a contract with people and we have an obligation to deliver something, and whatever happens at the end of the day. And once we start imagining that we're in partnership with a whole lot of people we have a contractual relationship with, we will muddy our relationship with them. So by all means, encourage all sorts of good relationships and helping understand each other and things, but we shouldn't be imagining that we are in partnership with people who we contract with in this or in any of our other contracts. It isn't a sort of a helpful thing. Great report, good where we're going. Thank you guys and girls, or whoever's behind this, both this report and delivering things.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any of further speakers? If not, can we just pass on behalf of the committee, Gavin, Doug and Julian, to the rest of the team. You've been working in a really challenging space. A lot to think the days and weeks and months ahead won't be as challenging. So good luck, and just pass that message on. I also need to mention Doug's, if it's not your last day, second last day with us. And want to thank you for your service and wish you all the very best in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Without further ado, I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. That now concludes the meeting, and I understand implementation will commence at 1 p.m. this afternoon. Thank you for your attendance. Thank you.